What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Canadian Football Fanatic YouTube channel. And thank you guys for tuning in to another video coming at you guys live from BC Place following a very, very disappointing 27-14 loss on behalf of the BC Lions. But as I said, folks, we are live from BC Place, doing our post-game live this week. And we are live once again on YouTube as well as Instagram. Let me make sure that we are firing up before I promise that, though. This should be good to go. As I mentioned, we should be up and live now on YouTube as well as our Instagram account. So if you guys are tuning in, we appreciate you guys so much. Hope you guys are able to hear us okay and our audio is coming in nice and clear for you guys at home. We are, as I said, at the stadium trying to do our post-game show tonight before we head back on the ferry. So hopefully you guys are able to hear us loud and clear. Hear me loud and clear as your regular scheduled programming will begin with the BC Lions post-game report. A very disappointing effort on behalf of the BC Lions tonight, falling 27-14. A good majority of the game was a ugly one, I will be honest, with a garbage time touchdown that makes things a tad bit better. But I will be honest, for a majority of this game, it was tough sledding offensively. It was an ugly game, and we have much to talk about on today's post-game report. But before we get into today's post-game report, of course, folks, if you guys to like the video, comment down below, comment how you guys are feeling after the 27-14 loss. I am sure the fan base, the pressure within the fan base is starting to heat up with just getting out of player and coaches post-game media availabilities. It seems that the locker room still has, the message is still headed in the right direction, that, the fan base, I'm sure within the fan base, it feels like the sky is falling after falling to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in back-to-back weeks. But it appears in that locker room, they're still staying very tight. They're still focusing on the message ahead, which is to, obviously learn as much as you can from this game. Try to obviously take some of the good with the bad and move on from there, because it is no easy task for the BC Lions in the next month of football, going on the road for the next 3 weeks, and then they return home to play Saskatchewan in July. It's going to be a very telling next month of the season. But as I said, comment down below how you guys are feeling. Most importantly, subscribe to the channel. When you guys subscribe to the channel, push the notification bell. You guys will get notified every single time we go live or upload any sort of content here on the channel. And as you guys can see, this is the first time we are going live here this season. I'm going to try to do these as much as we can, as long as the ferry transit scheduling is going to work for me. Tonight, unfortunately, we're going to have about 3 hours to kill, maybe about 2 hours after this one, unfortunately, but gonna have some time. So I thought, what not a better way to get the post-game report done than here at the stadium while I'm trying to kill some time. Brings me to a huge and big thank you to Matt Baker and the BC Lions for not only giving me this access, as you guys can see, still giving access, field access, press box access. So has been super helpful for myself being able to cover the Lions as best as possible for you guys in terms of our preview shows, post-game shows, and stuff like that. We were actually able to be down on the field once again for the game, but we were able to call in some help. So with the shout out to Matt Baker, as I mentioned, in the BC Lions. Shout out to Hamish, friend of mine who we worked together with the BC Lions the Vancouver Island Raiders last season, doing some content and social media for the team. Hamish also works for Rogers TV here in Canada. Hamish actually got a job up in Squamish, the Squamish Rogers TV station. So he actually reached out and was interested in potentially maybe coming out, bringing his camera, since the iPhone can capture some good content, but not the quality that I think Hamish is going to bring in and be able to capture with his camera. So really looking forward to the way that turns out. I would love to be able to show you guys some of the content as of now, but still Hamish is actually currently driving back to Squamish. So Hamish, not only thank you to you, buddy, and big shout out to you for coming. But hopefully hopefully you're able to get home safe, and it's not too late of a night for yourself. So before we get into it, I believe the last reminder is to only subscribe to our social media channels. As you guys can see below, at Canadian Football Fanatics on Instagram, as well as on Twitter or X, wherever the kids are calling it these days. I'm going to continue to call it Twitter until the wheels fall off, at _CF Fanatics over there as well. Lastly, I guess on the reminders, of course, folks, just to subscribe to the channel is the most important thing. We're at 405, I believe, as of the time of this show. Would love to push that up to as high as we can get. Obviously, with our Instagram, we're doing very well over there, nearing 3,000 followers on our Instagram account in just over a year's time since we created it. So if we could push for, let's not maybe get to 3,000 right now, but 1,000 subscribers. I know there's a lot of people that the stats do not lie when checking out our YouTube studio, and they put up the 75% of people that are tuning in are unsubscribed to the channel. So please, folks, subscribe to the channel, be a friend, tell a friend as well what we're doing over here at the Canadian Football Fanatics. Not only are we doing a bunch of BC Lions content, but all of our Canadian football content as well. I'm interested to see if Hamish was able to get some Bombers footage as well from today's game. So before we get into the post-game report, I see Q-Man, friend of the show, is tuning in. Q-Man, let us know where you're tuning in from, whether it be in the Lower Mainland, maybe you're a BC Lions fan from outside the province, maybe you're a fellow Islander like myself. Q-Man, let us know where you're tuning in from in the chat. Q-Man, I know has tuned in to multiple post-game shows in the past last season. As I said, this being our first post-game report live this year. It's always fun having the chat chime in and kind of interact with you guys and bounce off, kind of be able to bounce ideas off each other, as well as I know Bobby, shout out to Bobby, good friend of mine, former CFL record holder. I shouldn't say former, I believe it's still intact, of fastest fan to visit all 9 stadiums across the CFL, although that is still pending. I believe another friend of the show, Chris, beat it as of now. I'm don't think it's been official yet in terms of into the record books, we will say, but I know he talks about being able to chime in the chat is a fun way to kind of go back and forth with you guys, and especially when I'm solo, it's kind of nice sometimes to be able to bounce ideas off you guys, like I was mentioning. But Q-Man puts up here, what's Allen's injury? That would be a disaster. I would agree wholeheartedly that would be a disaster. During the game, I tweeted out on our account that once the Dejon Allen injury happened, there was some shuffling around. I believe nothing was official, but I believe it is a shoulder or upper body injury. He had some sort of wrap on his upper arm area. It wasn't officially announced or reported what the injury was, but he was asked by I believe it was Farhan Lalji in the post-game media availabilities, is there any updates on the injuries? Coach Buck Pierce said that there wasn't anything too official or anything that he knows for sure as of now. Hopefully they're able to get some more details later tonight, going into tomorrow as well. But I agree, Keeman, that would be a disaster. Once Allen went down, Dejon Allen, right tackle for the BC Lions, there was some shuffling going on for the BC Lions. They had to slide right guard Corey Woodruff out to right tackle. They had to slide left guard Corey Woodruff out to right tackle. They kept Tyler Packer at right guard, kept Mike Couture at center, and they brought in Andrew Pearson to play left guard. So Chris Slugger obviously not dressing for this game due to racial implications and stuff like that, with Nathan Rourke not starting at quarterback, having to start another Canadian along the offensive line. They bring in Tyler Packer to start, and that means Chris Slugger unable to dress on game days. He gives you that versatility as well, being able to play tackle. And when you get in that situation, only dressing 6 offensive linemen, you're kind of having to shuffle things on the fly, and guys might have to play positions that they're not necessarily the most comfortable playing. So as of now, Q-Man, that's about all we have for updates in terms of Allen. I know the other few injuries were Jonah Tavai. Jonah Tavai looked like possibly, knock on wood, we're hoping for maybe something that's a little bit less serious. Although I would probably lean towards it not being maybe a season-ending injury because it would look like to be almost a knee injury. Don't want to say it, but some torn ligaments in that knee based off the play and the replay. Jonah Tavai kind of running down a play, a lot of heart and effort tracking down the play. He ends up kind of almost hyperextending his knee a little bit with kind of some of the chaos that comes with a play going downfield, and unfortunately was brought to the sideline, went underneath the medical tent, and came back out of the medical tent, was trying to ride the stationary bike a little bit, didn't look the most comfortable, if I'm being honest. So it would be something to monitor as well, because I think Jonah Tavai has played very solid so far through 3 weeks for the BC Lions. Arguably one of their better players so far, has shown up in each and every one of the games so far for the BC Lions. So somebody to keep an eye on for sure when it comes to Jonah Tavai. And then Jackson Finley was another one who left the game, went into the medical tent, came back out, was on the sideline for a majority of the game in gear, but I believe wasn't able to go back in. I didn't see him return to the game after going out of the medical tent. So I think maybe was keeping him on the sideline for in case of emergency and in case of some more injuries happened. But yeah, other than that, don't have too much of an update other than what Buck Pierce gave to us in the post-game availability, which is, I believe, up on the BC Lions YouTube channel as of now. I see Q-Man is tuning in from UBC. So Q-Man, hope you're enjoying, buddy. Maybe we'll run into each other out at a UBC game this fall. Got to make my way out to the campus once again and take in a game. It's been a few years. It's been since 2023 since I made it out to a UBC game. And they're just fabulous, fabulous atmosphere, good football, and we need to get out to more events like that to just showcase them as well and get some content. I would love to get out there and take on that role for sure. Although I know UBC has a fabulous content team already. I see a friend of the show, Jay, a fellow Islander as well, a fellow Nanaimoan. Jay, appreciate you for tuning in, buddy. I know you're always number one supporter first and foremost, but I know you're always pounding the table for our live post-game recap shows so that you can chime in. I know you really enjoy the chat and kind of making your comments known as well. So Jay, keep it coming, buddy. I'd love to hear how you're feeling. I would imagine you're pretty disappointed, as are many Lions fans. But Jay, let us know where you're tuning in, buddy. I know you're coming in from Nanaimo, but are you at home? Are you at the Quarterway? I know you like to go to for your BC Lions game day every once in a while. Where you tuning in from, Jay? Let us know how you're feeling on this post-game report. So I think I've been rambling. I've been kind of trying to not get to the tough parts for as long as I can. I think we have to dive into the show now. We have to dive into the meat and potatoes of this game, and it was a ugly one. If we're calling a spade, this was a tough game to watch. Before we get into this, though, of course, if you guys are tuning in on Instagram as well, I see there's a few people tuning in on Instagram. Please be sure to make sure that you guys are following us, liking all of our content, and chiming in on the chat feature on Instagram as well. I've seen a few people that were already chiming in. I know I had a Nate Boschman question in here. I believe I saw Alex Finley. BC Lions Radio Network as well. A few people tuning in. But yeah, thoughts on Nate Boschman. Not gonna lie, I didn't get to watch much of that Montreal game. Big fan of Nate, but obviously I think kind of not wanting to say too much, not being able to see too much of him yet. Rooting for Nate in Montreal Alouettes uniform. But before I get too much off topic, getting a little bit flushy here, a little off topic, let's get into our post-game report here, folks, before we get too long. Although I do want to try to kill as much time as possible. So I see Jay says, at home, I worked all day. It was disappointing checking in on the score. I agree, buddy. Unfortunately, I don't know if this is going to make things better, but we're going to get into things now. But that being said, I think always the one silver lining, or one thing I always try to remind folks is I feel like this is somewhat of a therapy session, right? We can try to find, you know, silver linings of things, try to get a better understanding of maybe what things went wrong, what things can maybe go better for the BC Lions, etc. So like I mentioned, I always try to treat these as somewhat of a therapy session. So before we do, I figured I'd give you guys a quick little backdrop of BC Place After Dark before we get into it, though. Check out the post-game report as we do it from BC Place. I don't know if I can lock in on the or if I can make it a little bit more clear for you guys. Hopefully you guys are seeing that okay. I actually want to get a selfie with that. I think it would be hilarious for the vlog or little video content we're putting together for the Instagram. So smile, folks. You guys are gonna be in the vlog. All righty, let's get into it, ladies and gentlemen. Let me plug in computer before we dive. So let's get into it, guys. Another ugly loss for the BC Lions that now fall to 1-2 on a young season, which is all good. I think there's a lot of people that you know, rightfully ride the roller coaster of a long football season. And like I said, rightfully so. Being a fanatic, being a fan, you have every right to go with, you know, ride the highs, ride the lows. And there's some high highs and low lows throughout a CFL season. But I would just try to tell people of, you know, before we freak out, and I know Blake's already putting in the chat that, you know, 1 or 2 more of these games and I'm done. I know that Blake doesn't mean that, but before you get worked up and stuff like that, to just try to remember of, you know, Calgary lost an ugly game today. It happens throughout a CFL season that every team, Montreal, Saskatchewan, they're going to lose ugly games throughout a long CFL season. Now, does it happen a lot for them? No. Are they able to clean it up faster? Yes. I've been on the other side of things in the past in terms of, Daryl, friend of the program as well, fellow Edmonton Elks fan, or is an Edmonton Elks fan. He always liked to use the saying of, the CFL season doesn't start till after Labor Day, which I feel like I've become more and more on board over the last 2 seasons, I guess we should say, but is true in a certain sense of only 4 and 5 teams in each division. As long as you're totally not out of the picture come Labor Day, 1 or 2, 3 games back, even 3 games probably not ideal, but 1 or 2 games back, you're right within striking distance of being able to get back in the playoff picture, no matter how ugly that start was to the season. So similar to Winnipeg, although it's mostly a one-off and hard to do, you never know what's able to happen as long as you're able to stay in the hunt. So personally for me, guys, as ugly as these are, let's try to woo-saw. Let's take some deep breaths. Obviously, let's talk about this. Let's be realistic. Let's be critical of the BC Lions, right? But let's try to not, the sky is falling, the sky is falling, the sky is falling, the Lions season is over, because it is not, and other teams are going to have problems throughout the long season that is a CFL season. So with another ugly loss comes looking ahead to what the next month of the BC Lions season looks like, which is going to be a tall task, as Jay already mentions here in the chat. When looking at the BC Lions next 4 games in the next month of the season, the BC Lions have on the schedule going to Saskatchewan, going to Montreal, arguably the 2 best teams in the CFL, then going to Edmonton for a tough game versus the Edmonton Elks, and then hosting the Saskatchewan Roughriders at home, which, I think the biggest look ahead for some of these games of, can the BC Lions come out of this 500? Can the BC Lions come out of this with a win? Or, what kind of the status going into this? Is Nathan Rourke available for these games or not? I think is the biggest wait and see for expectations for this next month of the season. For me personally, I think a fine outcome is to go 2-2 over the next 4 games. If you're the BC Lions, if you're able to split with Saskatchewan and you're able to pick up a game over Edmonton, get to 3-4 on the season. As I mentioned, kind of, starting to get closer to August. You're right in the thick of things. You're obviously not over 500, which isn't ideal, but you're right there, you're still staying competitive, and you've made it out of that tough point in the season, and now you're able to come back to BC Place, hopefully take advantage of playing at home, playing some easier opponents compared to, like I mentioned, Saskatchewan, Montreal, arguably the two best teams in the CFL. It's going to be an interesting next month of the season and could potentially make or break the rest of the Lions season, depending on how they come out of that stretch. So, when looking at, or I guess my kind of last thought here on kind of some of my initial thoughts before we get into a few other talking points. But kind of distracted here, folks. It's tough where if you guys see me kind of looking around, it's tough to keep my focus on everything that's going around here on the backup. We got lights going off, we got people taking off field markers and banners and stuff like that, cleaning up the stadium. We got shout out to Jumbo Cheese, JC Abbott, and the rest of the crew over there in the press box, just to the left, which is where we were actually taking the game. Just right there's JC Abbott, Jumbo Cheese, where he made his Jumbotron appearance last week, eating his salad or whatever he was trying to claim. BC Place doing him dirty. My last kind of on initial thoughts here before we get into a little bit more of the game would just be that I think the Lions were hanging around this game, hanging around, we're hanging around. 17-3, I think we're at a point in time. I think 20-3 at a certain point, which is, as I mentioned, not what you want, not ideal from the BC Lions, but in the CFL game, within striking distance of making the comeback. And for me, when it comes to being within striking distance, the Lions just never made a play. They never. It almost felt like they were kind of letting the Winnipeg Blue Bombers make all of the big plays, the game changing plays, where when the Lions needed that big catch or maybe that interception or maybe that stop on third down, whatever it may be, they couldn't get it, and the Winnipeg Blue Bombers always seemed to be the ones that were converting those bigger plays when it came to, okay, maybe this is the Lions' big break in terms of getting a stop here, going on a drive down the field, and cutting it into a 10-point ball game, into a one-score ball game. They were never able to do that. It seemed like they were never able to kind of quite get their traction, their footing in this game, which held them back in terms of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers didn't play a. They didn't. They did. They played winning football, and that's, I think, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers to a T. Right? Is they're not going to beat themselves. They're going to do all the little things properly. They are disciplined as well. And I think just the Lions, unfortunately, we're waiting for stuff to happen in terms of, or excuse me, they were waiting for stuff to happen instead of going to make the plays, going to intercept that ball, going to get that quarterback, bring that ball carrier down, whatever it may be. I feel like just the Lions were one step behind in terms of making that play to change the outcome of this game. So talking about making that play to change the outcome of this game, where I want to start, and I think what killed the Lions' chances of winning this ball game was the turnover difference in this game, which was a little bit better when you look at the stat sheet, but the stat sheet again doesn't tell the whole story. So that's why I like to get a little bit of a better idea, go downstairs to the post-game player and media availability. I'm able to get a better sense of how the team's feeling, the message within the locker room, all that sort of stuff. And it seemed like they were all good. Well, I shouldn't say all good, but a little more composed in the locker room than maybe I would have thought after a victory like this, where I thought maybe some frustration would be shown a little bit more. This game, I thought, came down to 4 turnovers for BC. Let me actually just make sure that this is correct. Yeah, so 4 turnovers for BC. That includes 4 fumbles, 2 interceptions, 0 turnover on downs, and that saw 2 interceptions for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. So a turnover battle that was won by Winnipeg 4-2, and ultimately was the difference maker in this ball game. As I mentioned, no slight at Winnipeg on saying that they played winning football. They didn't do anything to knock the BC Lions' socks off. They did their job. But that being said, I think if the BC Lions were able to not even win the turnover battle, get 2 of those, cut them in half, break even in the turnover department this game, I think this game is much different. And I also think that the turning point in this game that we will chat about in a little bit, um, this game is completely different at what should have been a 10-3 ball game before that kind of TSN turning point moment happened, if kind of the best way to put it. Which I guess is maybe kind of how we can transition this. As I mentioned, Winnipeg wins 4-2. Zach Collaros throwing 2 interceptions to the BC Lions, which we will definitely talk about in a little bit. I thought it was a tough break for quarterback Jeremiah Masoli, who I was chatting with JC Abbott downstairs post game, and we both agreed that we thought Masoli played pretty well through 2 quarters, 3 quarters, majority of the early part of the game, but just couldn't get some of those big plays to fall for him, some of those bigger completions. And unfortunately, the biggest play for him in the first half was a negative one and was a bigger play for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Jeremiah Masoli not kind of facing some pressure, trying to evade it, trying to get up in the pocket, looks to escape the pocket, looks to escape the rush, finds a James Butler that is out into the left flat, looks to dump it off into JB in the flat. Unfortunately for Masoli and JB, a game of inches. It was definitely a backwards pass, especially with the review and being able to see it on replay. It was a sea hair. It was a very close bang play and a good call by the referees on the field that called it a touchdown on the field. I think rightfully so. They probably wanted to call it a touchdown so they could review it just to make sure, especially in some of those close plays. But it was, I would say, definitely less than a yard in terms of it being backwards. It was backwards, but if it's 6 inches, 8 inches forward, it's a straight down the line pass, it's an incomplete pass, and all things are good. Now, where things went from bad to worse is it went from a incomplete pass to a backwards lateral, which is a live football. The Winnipeg Blue Bombers were able to scoop up the ball and return it for a 70-plus scoop and score touchdown. Who was it that the interception? I believe it's Parker, number 7, Jamal Parker, who had 2 interceptions in this game, was a pretty big playmaker for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, coming off the torn ACL, I believe, last season for the Bombers. A pretty big playmaker the last 2 weeks, I should say, making multiple plays in the game versus BC last week in Winnipeg, and then this week, as I mentioned, the 2 interceptions. He's off to a hot start on this season, Jamal Parker. So he ends up, as I mentioned, the backwards pass from Masoli that went to James Butler that, we'll talk about James Butler in a little bit. James Butler is his biggest critic, so I'm not going to hammer home on this. And, James Butler needs to do better. He obviously wants to catch that ball. He knows he needs to catch that ball. JB needs to catch that ball, and it is a completely different ball game. I think it stays 10-3. I think the game stays much closer. The game goes from 10-3, 17-3, and personally, I don't know if it's probably going to be wrong of me to say, because as I tried to reiterate from time to time again, these guys are professional athletes for a reason. They prove guys like me wrong for a living. Case in point, Chris Shoveler last week of, Cole's up here pounding the table. Make Chris Shoveler beat you after the BC Lions. What happened? Chris Shoveler beat him with his arm, and I'm looking like a dummy. I shouldn't say this about Masoli, but it didn't feel like at that point he was going to be able to muster a 14-point comeback down in the first half, 17-3. It just really felt, I don't want to say over at that point, because it sounds silly to me to say a 17-3 game in the first half in a CFL game is over, but it just felt like all of the air came out of the building, which, when talking about the building and, having 50,000 here last week for the concert kickoff and season opener for Snoop Dogg, and a big BC Lions win over the Edmonton Elks. I'm very curious to see. I didn't hear it announced during the game what the official attendance will be, but it was definitely not as full as it could be in the lower bowl, and the upper bowl was pretty empty. And judging on how the game went, not a lot of action offensively, not a lot of entertainment. Fans were starting to clear out pretty early, especially in that fourth quarter. I want to say with 7-8 minutes left, clearing out of the game, and was just a tough one, as I mentioned. From that point on, the backwards pass that went for a scoop and score for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, it just felt like man, that's almost curtains with how the Lions are feeling right now offensively, and um, it was just a bummer. I can't think of any other words to say, but just of like a absolute gut punch of the Lions are kind of two steps forward, three or four steps back offensively of finding some success and then getting in their own way. And it was just an unfortunate one. And when it comes to injuries, or excuse me, turnovers, and when it comes to turnovers even more, you know, I thought majority of the turnovers, three of the four turnovers for BC were by Jeremiah Masoli, with the two interceptions and then the one fumble. Tough breaks for Masoli. The one Eberhardt one that I think was the second Jamal Parker interception, he drifted a little high. Maybe you would have liked to see that a little bit lower for, I don't remember if it was for Eberhardt or McInnes, the 18 or 19. Always kind of um, they're hard to see. I guess they're hard to you get hard to differentiate between the 18 and 19. Although I know a lot of people are like, well, one's Justin McInnes, 6'7", and Aiden Eberhardt's the 5'10" little receiver. So I would say just watch from up here. In this perspective, it's a little bit different, but um, tough breaks for Masoli when kind of finishing on the turnover side of things. You know, hard to put sole blame on Masoli, I guess is kind of the best way to put it when talking about the turnovers for Jeremiah Masoli. But at the end of the day, he's the guy that has the ball in his hands. He's the one that needs to take a little bit better, a little bit better. I don't even want to say like a little bit better care, I guess, is the best way to put it, of the football, especially in some of these closer games when, as I mentioned, 10-3 ball games turn into 17-3 ball games very quickly. So, Jay, appreciate you, buddy, for put the attendance in the chat. Jay puts in just over 20K was the attendance. So not bad, especially when you look across the CFL and you see, I believe the BMO attendance was 12K on Friday night, so not great as well. But as we keep moving, I think the next talking point here in our post-game report would have to be the trenches. Before we do, hello, Bubbies. I appreciate you for tuning in. Hopefully you're enjoying your time with Monica, and I will see you later. Make sure that you're not late for picking me up, because I want to get home and rest up and into bed as quickly as possible as the lights go out behind me, folks. You know, that's almost getting time to close up the stadium here when the lights are going off, which is all good though. So we'll finish up the show. Hopefully you guys are able to see me all good still. And then we'll get out of here. I got about 2 hours to kill before. Oh, no, we don't want to do that. Maybe that, probably the best thing, right? I'll turn on the flashlight, give a little bit more light to the face. Um, the trenches. Oh boy, this is going to be a big conversation as well when talking about the trenches. I think first we got to talk about the defensive line, and this is a tough conversation to have. It's a tricky conversation to have when talking about the offensive line, excuse me, the defensive line. I think where we need to start with is Matthew Betts. And we had this conversation on the channel multiple times during the offseason of the importance and where it ranked of bringing back a guy like Matthew Betts under a contract that would be touted as one of the highest paid contracts around the CFL, which it turned out to be. Highest paid defensive player in the league at the time of signing. Matthew Betts has had a quiet start to the year. I know week one of the post-game report after the Evans Nuggets game, I mentioned of seeing multiple flashes from Betts of beating his tackle, getting a jump on his tackle off the snap of the ball, being in the backfield multiple times, and being that close to a sack, especially versus a guy like Trey Ford. It's hard to put blame. But the last 2 weeks, it's been. I would love to see more from Matthew Betts, and it's I think the toughest part when talking about the Matthew Betts conversation, which I was kind of my reasoning for maybe not wanting to go towards bringing back a guy like Matthew Betts, because understanding what it would command, being the highest paid defensive player in the CFL, that limits you somewhere else. Where obviously you're signing in this department means that your D tackle and your DN maybe you're not able to spend as much as you would like at that position, right? And I think what we're seeing now is kind of that what I've been calling for the last few games is like, who is going to be that Robin to Batman that is Matthew Betts, right? And I think we're waiting for Kemeka Toure to maybe get a little bit more comfortable, which 2 sacks in 2 games. I don't know if he got on the sack sheet today. I don't believe so. He's doing well, but I think it's the big time plays. Like, I don't want to see those garbage sacks that obviously, yeah, it's nice to see. I'm not complaining, but those big sacks and big time moments that get the offense back on the field and is able to generate some momentum for the team. I think that is where the Lions are lacking right now. And then they obviously got the addition of Sione Tiama back from suspension this game. Hard to knock Sione too much with it being the first game back from suspension. So we'd like to see him we'd like to see him in game action a few more times before we get too critical with him. I believe he finished the game with actually a half sack or the credited sack. But Sione is another guy that I think far too often is too quiet and needs to be more impactful opposite Matthew Betts. I think when that starts to happen, we'll see Matthew start to be more effective. That being said, he still needs to be the guy that is arguably the highest paid defensive player in the CFL. He needs to start making impact on the field multiple times a game if you're Matthew Betts. The BC Lions need it. They depend on it. If you're, Mike Benavides, if you're Buck Pierce, if you're Ryan Rigmain, if you're Neil McAvoy, you're banking on Matthew Betts being a huge game-changing impact player every week throughout the season. So, when talking about the D-line, to talk positively, Jonah Tavai, I think, is a huge one to talk about. Has been very impactful, has been very noticeable multiple times a game throughout the first 3 weeks of the season. Now, that comes with a gut punch because we don't know what the status is of Jonah Tavai moving forward here. Leaving the game with an injury, would look to be a lower body, possibly a knee injury. I don't want to speculate too much, but a tough blow, especially for a guy like a defensive lineman where you're playing in the interior of the defensive line and you're playing defensive tackle, you're trying to anchor and you're trying to put you're trying to basically root yourself into the ground sometimes. A knee injury, man, I feel like is a really, as I mentioned, just I don't know how else to put it other than a gut punch for Jonah Tavai. Hopefully it's nothing too serious and he's able to rehab this next week, and we're going to need him next week in Saskatchewan. AJ Ouellette, Kadeem Carey, that running game, they're going to need Jonah Tavai for sure next week. I think the only silver lining would be is that the BC Lions do have some depth in that defensive tackle room. More specifically, it's probably their most depth, I would say, on defense, and you could argue on the entire team when looking at the defensive tackle position as well. So will be something to monitor over the next week of BC Lions practices and then into next game versus Saskatchewan. Forgive me, I'm forgetting his first name, but Dwayne Hendricks for the BC Lions, another interior defensive tackle who started alongside Jonah Tavai. Dwayne Hendricks has been another bright spot for the BC Lions here through 3 weeks. And it's a tough one, especially for maybe fans that are at home watching through the TSN broadcast and you're not able to see some of that line play a little bit more, especially up in the press box where you're sitting in a very good vantage point for being able to track some of that stuff. Dwayne Hendricks, Jonah Tavai, I think are guys that, yes, they're showing up on the stat sheet as well, but they do a lot of stuff that doesn't show up on the stat sheet in terms of eating double teams, getting pressures, creating havoc in the middle of that defense, and have been by far the best unit for the BC Lions defense here through 3 weeks. Now we just need the rest of the defense to start getting on board, starting to play to that effort level, starting to play to that talent level, because they've been playing a very high level, both Jonah Tavai and Dwayne Hendricks along that defensive line. So I guess transitioning over to the offensive line here is just that the offensive line, I think, is probably the best way to put it, is maybe hit and miss for the BC Lions offensive line, where sometimes you're hitting a double right up the gap and you're getting to second base and you're able to, feel good about yourself, and they're able to, give Masoli some time. They're able to open up some run lanes for JB. But there's other times where Winnipeg rushes 3 or 4 and they have, the jumbo team in with, Riley Pickett in the game, Andrew Pearson in the game. They have 7, 8 blockers in the box and they're allowing pressure. There was one in the game where, JB's in the backfield, Pickett, Pearson are all in the game, basically 8-man protection. And Masoli was flushed out of the pocket and ended up throwing a incomplete pass to Javon Catoy, I believe, who was the targeted receiver. That's just unacceptable when another team is rushing 4 guys and you have 6, 7, 8 bodies potentially to block it up, and they're still getting home and they're still getting pressure. And it happened a few times last week in Winnipeg. And I think it's a huge issue when it comes to whether it's communication, whether it's scheme, whether it's just talent level. The Lions need to be better along the offensive line, no matter who's in the game. Nathan Rourke, freaking Travis Lulay, whoever it may be. The Lions need to be better in that aspect. And the bummer is that when being critical like this, there is times where the BC Lions offensive line is playing pretty well and putting together some pretty good stretches of game where, as I mentioned, opening up run lanes, giving good time for pass protection. It's just it's almost the critical plays where they give up the big sack or they aren't able to pick up the short yardage situations, stuff like that. The little things, I think we talked about it with Tre Ford, not only in the weekly show, we talked about it on the post game report in week 1 of like Tre Ford, I feel like does the extraordinary things really well, the hard stuff really well. But when coming to the little stuff, it's like he struggles with that so much. And it's like, man, a guy that can be so good has the potential to be a all-star caliber player. I think this offensive line, it's something similar. Like an offensive line that has the potential to be a championship caliber offensive line just struggles in big moments that I think kind of brings them down to an uglier level, and I think just stains some of the image of some of the game that they're put together. And I think, unfortunately for them as well, it's been too long now that the Lions have struggled along the trenches, specifically along the offensive line, dating back to the Mike Riley era, before Nathan Rourke even got here. Mike Riley, Nathan Rourke, Vernon Adams. We went through multiple quarterbacks now, and it's still an issue and needs to be something that needs to be fixed. Going into next offseason, I don't think the Lions can come back with, 3. They can. I don't know if they can return 3 offensive linemen. I think outside of the tackles, you need to seriously consider looking at bringing in 3 new interior offensive linemen. I think Joel Broxton did a pretty good job. Did anyone hear Willie Jefferson's name too often today? I think Joel Broxton did a pretty good job. Matched up with Willie Jefferson. Dejon Allen, outside of the injury, fared pretty well. I think through 3 games, he's kind of paid off. The trade's paid off for sure. Now, obviously, what's going to happen with injuries, and when we have to shuffle things around, and if he's not able to go, things will definitely be to keep an eye on the offensive line come next week and the next month for sure. Especially with Saskatchewan is doing one thing. Montreal on that defensive line, man, scare the heck out of me. If you're the BC Lions, Coach Charbonneau, that offensive line coach, and the rest of that group, I would be wanting to get our best performance of the year. Our best performance of the year, just slightly under the best performance of the year versus Saskatchewan next week. And then our best performance of the year versus Montreal on that defensive line, who have 3, 4 multiple bodies. When you look at, guys like Lawal Ugawak, Isaac named Bergelin, heck, guys like Josh Archibald, who I would take on this defensive line for the BC Lions right now, hasn't even really been able to contribute much because of the depth they have with guys like Mustafa Johnson, Lawal Ugawak, as I mentioned. You name it, the names go on and on and on for sure. So when talking about the O-line quickly here, G-Man actually chimes in. I think he's slightly disagreeing with me, which I do agree with you, G-Man. I don't want to be too critical of the offensive line because I do agree with you. 2 sacks in 3 games given up. O-line is not an issue. Kind of what I was just saying there. Hopefully you picked it up of like the O-line does a good job, and I hear you on like the numbers part of it, but I find far often that, with Nathan last week, more so than the Edmonton game, of like they're rushed so much of the time, of like maybe the sacks aren't getting there and the sacks aren't showing up in terms of for the other team, but I feel like the pressure that they let up, and like I'm saying, the big moments overshadowed their say that they put together 3 good quarters of football. Like I'm saying, I agree with you in that aspect of 2 sacks in 3 games. Absolutely, that looks good on paper. And at moments, I think they are putting together a good chunk of the season. I think it's just, as I said, when a big money down and second and six, it's a manageable down and distance. And as I said, you have Riley Pickett in the game. You have James Butler in the backfield who has blocking responsibilities. You have Andrew Pearson who's in the game, who's the extra offensive lineman, jumbo tight end, and Riley Pearson who's the fullback. And the Winnipeg Blue Bombers are rushing 4 guys. You need to pick that up. There needs to be nobody even close to Jeremiah Masoli on those snaps, on those reps in the game. And I think those come up, and as I mentioned, they overshadow for me personally. As I mentioned, Keeman, I love that you're having your opinion. I would encourage you to keep chiming in so that we're able to bounce off each other here. I just slightly disagree with. I don't know if I would go as far as to say O-line is not an issue. I would say kind of. I would maybe be a slight notch ahead of maybe your kind of concern. I don't even want to say concern level because it doesn't sound like you're too concerned. I would say my concern level is kind of just going off in terms of the radio. Maybe on the radar. Maybe I'm just kind of getting into that orange yellowish area. I would say you're still in the green, obviously, right? I'm kind of just getting into that orange yellowish area, not moving towards, but obviously red would be kind of critical mass in terms of talking about the offensive line. So let's talk about something that I think was arguably the biggest killer. We just talked about it a little bit, so I don't want to spend too much time on it, but a pass that James Butler needs to catch and needs to come down with because, as I said, it was the TSN turning point for this game for sure. So, I talked about it earlier of like the Jeremiah Masoli evading the rush, escaping the pocket. He finds James Butler in the left flat. A game of inches in terms of being a backwards pass, but JB, man, it hit you right here. Sorry, folks, I'm going back and forth from Instagram and StreamYard, so I'm making sure I'm still up. But it hit him right in the chest, right in the chest area, and whether it was Masoli threw a rocket, regardless, it right off the chest plate, right off the ground, and Jamal Parker picks it up for a scoop and score and returns it to the house. And as I said, I thought it was game over. I thought it didn't feel like after that point 17-3 how dead it was also in here, the vibe, the energy around the BC Lions. It almost felt like curtain, and it's something that James Butler needs to desperately come down with. Excuse me, folks, we saw it last year be a killer, and I think was a big reason why the BC Lions wanted to move on from maybe a guy like Stanback. I shouldn't say a main reason why they wanted to move on from a guy like Stanback, because I really enjoyed Stanback's action last year, his season last year for the BC Lions. But the dropped interception that went back to the house, AJ Allen ended up taking back to the house for a touchdown for Saskatchewan last season, which was a little swing pass of the backfield to William Stanback. He kind of juggled it, went off his foot, went up in the air. AJ Allen returned it for a touchdown. Those things are huge, man. Turning points, momentum swings, whatever you want to call it, just huge. Even if it's a catch and it doesn't go anywhere, that's okay. It's not turning into points for the other team just yet. I shouldn't say that it's obviously not turning into points because stuff could happen. It's just, man, with how quiet he's been as well. With you look at tonight. Hope you guys are able to see me okay. Going to CFL stats here quickly. I'm looking at tonight. It obviously looks maybe a little bit better, especially with the long of 20. That helps it look a little bit better. But James Butler finishes the game 9 carries, 44 yards, 0 touchdowns, which is a 4.9 average per carry, which is we look at that pretty good. 5 yards per carry basically looks like on 9 carries. It's like, man, maybe we should have got JB a little bit more involved. And when you look at a long run of 19, I like to say this a lot of, you can't take that back. It happened. But if you take away 19 yards for that 44 and say 20 of that yards, 24 yards and 8 carries, it was tough sledding outside of that longer run of 20 yards for James Butler. And I think is something that they desperately need to get on track, and something that is desperately a vocal point of a Buck Pierce offense is that leaning on the run game, setting up the offense off the run game, being able to use the run game as your bread and butter, bringing that defense forward, to hit those deep shots over the top. And I think teams are just sitting back and not scared of the run game. They're going to dare teams to run the ball because they don't believe that the Lions can consistently beat them. And then the Lions keep throwing deep because they're hoping that the play action can bring them forward, the run game, the threat of the run game can bring them forward, the threat of knowing Buck Pierce's, I think, offense, maybe they think that they can maybe bring them forward. You're not going to scare any defenses if you're not being able to be, not even consistent. I shouldn't say consistent. Competent, I guess maybe the best way to put it, or like a threat. If you're not going to be a threat running the ball, teams are going to play coverage on you and dare you to beat you going against the ground. And that's almost what the Winnipeg Boomers have done the last 2 weeks. They've said, okay, we're going to sit back in coverage. We're going to take away Justin McInnis. We're going to take away Keon Hatcher, beat us underneath, and beat us on long, patient drives, or beat us with James Butler underneath running the ball. And the BC Lions haven't been able to do that, and needs to be fixed, right? As I mentioned, I think there's definitely, I want a fine line of saying, and I want to put this in here of, the fellas, Coach Shane and Blake, were going off about this on our group chat of like, sorry folks, totally lost where I was there. I totally lost where I was there. I had a thought come into my mind there for a second when talking about, but I see Q-Man's here chiming in the chat. Maybe Q-Man, you guys can let me know where I was talking about as I'm rambling, going here, there, and everywhere. Turnovers are the issue. I agree. Q-Man actually also says 3 games, sacks plus TFLs, 12-4, 4 against. Yeah, that's tough. That's tough for sure. I didn't know that. Huh. Sorry. Q-Man reminds me right there. Oh, I see my man Bobby's in the chat now as well. But Q-Man reminds me where I was talking about of the Buck Pierce and having to establish his offense and how to establish his offense, I think is kind of the thing that we're not seeing right now. Brady Oliveira and what, like I was saying of Coach and Shane and Blake were saying of like, Buck has to realize and adapt his offense to who he has in BC, right? And I agree wholeheartedly with that, right? He doesn't have Brady Oliveira in Winnipeg, right? So why, pound your head against the wall or pound your head against the door trying to establish run if it's not going? 9 carries is not trying to pound your head against the wall, trying to get the run game going. I think, once you get into 20 carries, something like that is definitely doing so. You have to be getting yards to continue to run the ball and to feel confident in calling that. And I don't think Buck Pierce is confident in calling the run right now. And I think probably a little bit, I don't know if I want to say flustered, but probably not accustomed to, I'm trying to think of the right word to say here. His comfortability, right, is kind of being in the Winnipeg scheme and being able to rely on Brady Oliveira and, on a 2nd and 6 being like, hey, let's try to run the football here and see what happens, right? And being able to have confidence because he knows that offensive line is going to get a push. He knows that Brady Oliveira is going to fall forward for a few yards, where in BC, that's not how things have went. And that's not how the results have been on the field. So something that needs to be fixed, something that needs to be looked at, and something that needs to be corrected, something that needs to be, I think, not looked at, because I want James Butler on the field, but something that I chatted about on the preview this week of, does Horvath start to get a little bit more burn here moving forward? How does he maybe start to maybe show his impact or leave his impact on the offense? Or do they even want to, is that even a thought, right? Maybe they're just wanting to solely focus on trying to get James Butler started. That'll be something to monitor, I think, in the next month of the season, especially with Saskatchewan in Montreal. I think that's going to be super important to try to run the ball, try to shorten the game. That's somewhat of what they were able to do today in terms of, I think the time of possession was basically split right down the middle. But I see Bobby chiming in. Bobby, no running step for how many years in a row now? I think you were going with that. Basically, yeah, Bobby, is what I was going with. I wouldn't say for years, because I think last year we had a little bit of a threat with Stanback. I think it's just the offensive line more so than freaking anything, to be completely honest. But Bobby, I appreciate you, buddy, for always chiming in, for tuning in, and these individuals, man, these individual post game shows are no easy task. It's a little easier when you guys are chiming in on the chat. So I appreciate you guys for hanging out with me here tonight. Hopefully you're able to get home, Bobby, safe and sound. I know, I'm sure if I know you the way you are, I don't think you probably hung out for the rest of that game. Although maybe you had some money on it, you wanted to see how things finished off. But folks, we are just about an hour in. I'm gonna get into one more segment and then some things I like, and then we are gonna call this a show. And I got about, as of now, 2 hours before I even catch the ferry back home. That's 2 hours before I catch the ferry. Hour and 40, hour and 45 minutes ferry ride, and probably just chime that into 2 hours. It's basically about 4 hours now before I get home. So trying to take as much time as I can on the post game here tonight, with not wanting to take too long, because I'm actually wanting to maybe probably go get a bite to eat before I take an Uber down to the ferry and get out of here. My last segment, some positives. Actually, no, I guess this is not too positive quite yet, because these guys haven't been, I think, up to I don't want to say up to standard, because I think a lot of the last 2 weeks has been the defense, and they're wanting to take these two guys out of the game. And these two guys I want to talk about next is Justin McInnis and Keon Hatcher. These guys, you know, right now it kind of seems like, you know, essentially the Lions offense right now is McInnis or Hatcher or bust. And that's not a great sign. Now, it is only 3 games in, so there is a lot of time to course correct. There's a lot of time to get better. There's a lot of time to, lean on some other guys, maybe try to go into some different directions offensively. I don't know what it is in terms of right now. It feels like pulling teeth. It really feels, maybe the last 2 games and that first half versus Edmonton more specifically, of like the offense week 1 in the first half, really tough sled. Winnipeg last week, even more tough sled. This week, it felt like the toughest of sled. And as I said, outside of Hatcher or McInnis, and McInnis last week, not too much going on for McInnis. It's been tough in the receiving corps, right? Eberhardt, fairly quiet outside of the big catch last week that gave the Lions a little bit of momentum. So, you can give them a little bit of kudos there, but like, we need more. We need more from Eberhardt. I am excited to go actually rewatch the game, as I know it's probably shocking to many people. I actually don't mind going to rewatch some of these games, as terrible as rewatching the Bombers game was on the ferry ride and stuff like that. It's, as I said, with like the post game reports, a little bit therapeutic in terms of, like, you get a better idea of how, like, in upon first kind of reaction or first look, I feel like you get a better idea of going back, rewatching, maybe some things you missed. Obviously, I'm here trying to, tweet stuff out. I'm trying to check out on the sideline in terms of seeing the medical tent. So you miss some things, you do, for sure. So going back and being able to rewatch, you get a better feel, I think, of the game that second time. It just feels like outside of those two guys, we have absolutely nothing going offensively. Katoy, 2-3 weeks. Trying to watch what I want to say here, because big fans of Katoy. Not only personally, professionally. Personally, I say, obviously, with the ties being a former opponent of him when he was at the Langley Rams, and then professionally being a big advocate of Katoy, being a big believer of Katoy, and still standing on the table. I believe Katoy has the skill level to be a 1,000-yard receiver in this league. Now, a lot of people, I'm sure Bobby will be one of them, to maybe call me crazy or comment that. He's been underwhelming through 3 weeks. You look at week 1, I think you could argue or I don't want to say blame, but if he catches that touchdown in week one, things are completely different. And I know today was a tougher catch for him down around the goal line. This actually end zone I'm looking in behind the camera, where there was some a pressure look by the Bombers. The Bombers sent pressure. It wasn't one of those simulated pressure looks where they it looked like pressure was coming. They dropped off. It was a true pressure look. They sent the pressure and slowly tried to air it over the one defender. It got tipped, came down to Katoy. I don't want to say it was a catchable ball. He had an opportunity to bring it down and would have been a tough catch. So I don't want to be too critical of him, but it's a catch that I think Katoy can make. Like he can make one of those catches, and he needs to be better. As of now, especially today, he's probably looked at as target number 3 in the offense, right? And when you look at McKinnis Hatcher, arguably or not arguably, unquestioned number 1 and number 2 in the offense. Aiden Eberhardt hasn't done what Katoy's done in this league and is still proving himself in the offense, only in year 2 as a starter. Barry Hill not in the game, so you have a guy like Jermaine Jackson. Katoy is definitely looked at as a number 3 and needs to be stepping up when the ball's coming his way. And I think the other part for Katoy to maybe cut him some slack or maybe kind of come to his side, and obviously you could call me a homer because, as I mentioned, I am rooting for him. I find like his usage and the way the Lions use him, unfortunately, doesn't allow him to maybe get in rhythm the best. Now, what do I mean by that? Doesn't allow him to, catch the ball early, doesn't allow him to get the ball in his hands early. And I shouldn't say that because they can obviously get the ball in his hands early, but a lot of the time, as I mentioned with the jumbo sets with Pickett in the backfield and Pearson, they aren't shy to leave Katoy in the backfield as basically an extra offensive lineman. We'll call a spade a spade. He does have the freedom to, be a check down option and release out of the backfield, but more often than not, you're being put in a tough situation in terms of rhythm as a receiver, being able to see those balls early. It's someone similar as a running back, right? Where get your running back in rhythm where he's able to feel the defense more than see the defense or react off instincts, I guess, too, as well, right? Of like, as a running back or as a receiver, right, where you're able to get the ball in your hands more, you feel confident in making some of those more tough catches. Where that was Katoy's, I believe, first target of the day today. That tough catch that he had the opportunity to make for a touchdown, ended up not being able to come down with it, and is a tough one for the Lions too. They end up kicking the field goal, which is even more of a kind of a you drive. I know Bobby's actually a big advocate of this as well. Of down around the goal line, kicking threes instead of 7. It's almost a win for the defense in a lot of ways. So I'm gonna go back over to Instagram. I see a few people. I see we actually had a commenter. Absolutely agree with everything you're saying. Teams know our run game is weak. R Mill 81 over on Instagram. Appreciate you for chiming in. I see a few the boys chime in over on Instagram as well. Reegs, whoever else is tuning in, appreciate you guys. Hopefully you guys are enjoying. Hope you guys are having a good Saturday night. I can't wait to get back to the island and kick back and enjoy myself. So let's get into some positives and let's close this thing out. I said it on Twitter, and I don't want to make this sound like a slight, because I, for one, am for the brand. I love my specialists. Me being a former specialist in high school, although a lot of the time in high school, especially, it's kind of maybe the guy that maybe puts his hand up first. Of you're at high school practice back in the day, and coach asks who's kicked before, and you put your hand up, and to be honest, I probably was the first guy to put my hand up, and high school kicker, did a little bit of punting as well. So as I mentioned, I'm for the brand. I don't want to sound like I'm crap on these two guys in terms of, they had themselves a good night. But what I said on Twitter is, basically all you need to know for this game, if you're a BC Lions fan, of how things went tonight. The best players of the game tonight for the BC Lions: Carl Myers, punter, and Sean White, our kicker. Now, this won't be a shock to folks that are tuning in, because last week we gave our honorable mention game ball to Carl Myers. Keelan Hatcher got our original game ball. we're gonna give honorable mention game balls to um, Carl Myers once again and Sean White, Mr. Automatic, for doing his part. Whenever he's asked, he puts the ball through the post. It's unfortunate the Lions weren't able to get in scoring position a little bit more to knock it home. And he did indeed, Bobby. Carl Myers had a few bombs, man. When he gets a hold of it, the thing that I said with Carl Myers they obviously moved on from Seth Flintoff in the offseason, went with Carl Myers, who was with the team last season, dressed in the Touchdown Pacific game down in Victoria. He has an absolute cannon, a missile of a leg, that being Carl Myers. For me, it was just about consistency. If he could put it together and be consistent, there was no, one shank a game, or, if he can kind of limit it to a shank every month of a season, that's going to happen as a professional athlete. Obviously, you would love to limit them as much as possible throughout a 18-game season, but Carl Myers gets a hold of, one or two punts a game and is able to flip the field for the BC Lions, which is a huge, huge, huge plus for BC Lions. Unfortunately, weaponize it probably a little bit too much. Let's go check out actually Carl Myers. That's, as I said, that's all you need to know, folks, of how things went tonight. We're going to check the stats of Carl Myers here tonight. Actually, not too crazy. He only had 6 total punts on the night. I thought it would have been probably close to double digits, if we're being honest, off field. As I said, though, you get a better feel when you go back and rewatch. Maybe it won't feel as much when I go back home and rewatch the game tomorrow. So Carl Myers finished the game 6 punts, an average of 50.8 yards per punt, a long of 59, a 60-yard bomb of a punt, and had a total of 305 net yards punted today. And then, of course, I got to include Mr. Automatic, Sean White, 2 for 2, 43 yards, 100% on the day. And of course, the Lions went for 2, so he didn't get to kick any extra points as well. I see my boy Reegs. Reegs, hope you're not too hung over this morning, buddy. I know we had a good time celebrating our boy North last night. The punter going to be MVP next week, and 2 when they roll into Sask. Regan Calvin, a good Sasky boy. Shout out to all my Mancoda people. All the Sasky. There's a lot of people from Winnipeg here tonight. I know Sask travels like the best of them. Although next week, going into Saskatchewan, we'll have to wait a few weeks before all the watermelon heads show up here in BC Place. I believe July 19th is when Saskatchewan comes to town. Riggs, I'll be honest, buddy, I hope there's not too much punting going on for the BC Lions next week in Saskatchewan. It's going to be a big game for them if they fall to 1-3, man. Not good. And considering it'll be another loss to a Western Division opponent, that means the BC Lions will be 1-3 on the season, and 1-3 in the Western Division will be a tough hole to dig themselves out of. So, as I mentioned, honorable mention game ball is going to Carl Myers, Sean White. I am not giving my game ball to this fellow, but I want to mention him because I thought he's been having a very good start season for the BC Lions, a very good 3 games. Deontay Williams playing Sam or nickel linebacker for the BC Lions this season. He has made multiple plays, arguably, debatably, the hit of the season in week 1, makes multiple plays a game again here tonight, making multiple open field tackles where if he doesn't bring them down, they go for first downs, if not bigger plays, and has continued to have a strong showing on defense at that nickel linebacker position. A very physical, bigger body when it comes to a former DB who's made the transition to that linebacker position. Although I know it's a lot of people like to call it the coverage linebacker position. It is Sam, nickel, whatever you want to call it. Deontay Williams has done a fantastic job through 3 weeks. My game ball, though, friend of the show, good Canadian boy, safety for the BC Lions, Christophe Boyou, has had himself 2 back-to-back good games, made multiple plays the last week in Winnipeg in a losing effort, making multiple plays once again this week in a losing effort. Comes away with his first career interception, made a few more tackles in the game, made a couple key pass breakups as well. Christophe Boyou, who was talked about highly coming into this season, but was also talked highly last season as a rookie, right? Drafted by the BC Lions within the second or fourth round. I can't remember, second, third, or fourth round. Christophe Beaulieu out of Laval, with the Beaulieu family having roots in the CFL, with his brother already playing in the CFL, a Western alumni as a safety as well. Beaulieu made quite the impression as a rookie last year with the BC Lions, having heard his name multiple times from the kind of the, I guess, names around the BC Lions organization, who said multiple times, Christophe Beaulieu, this guy's going to be hard to keep off the field. And obviously with a guy like Adrian Green last year, it was hard to keep him. It was hard to kind of find a spot for him to start on the field. Christophe Beaulieu was mentioned time after time last year, not only in training camp, throughout the season, of this guy's going to be a starter one day in the CFL. And we're starting to see that the fruits of this labor pay off early in his career, right? Only still in his second year, third kind of game as a true starter, the for sure starter, not having to look behind him. I'm really liking what I've seen Christophe Beaulieu so far through 3 games, coming away with the interception today, a pass breakup, making multiple plays through the first 3 weeks. I'm really looking forward to see how Christophe Beaulieu continues to grow throughout the rest of the season, because I think there's still another level for him to get to for the BC Lions at safety. So that is going to basically wrap things up, folks. Our 10-minute post-game recap show here up in the press box, as I maybe get one more video for our quick little vlog before we call it a day. But man, another fun evening back in BC Place. I really can't complain. Shout out to Noah, buddy of mine as well. Noah was definitely, rightfully so, taking advantage of his Winnipeg Blue Bombers winning. He was taking some fun, having some fun, taking some jabs at me. He texted me during the game of, what did he say? I can't remember. Friendly reminder, Winnipeg owns BC, which is right. Touche. I said that touche because he did clap back. I guess what I was going to try to get at was, I'm just very thankful of the position that I'm at, where I am, of being able to capture this content for you guys, be able to do this for you guys, post-game shows, previews, all this sort of stuff, be in this super, as I said, super cool atmosphere of, right now I'm recording in BC Place. How cool is that? BC Place in the background. I'm just super thankful right now, and it's hard to really be all worked up over a BC Lions loss, because, as I said, I am super grateful for the position I am. I'm super grateful for everything I've been able to have access to, and I just kind of want to continue to give you guys the best content product possible, right? And I think if I'm in a bad mood in all these post game shows, I think it's going to hurt the product, and you guys won't want to continue to tune in. So, most importantly, obviously, I'm thanking everybody else. Thank you to everyone, each and every one of you guys that tune in, whether it's a weekly basis, a video basis, once ever. This could be your first time ever listening to me. Just super grateful for you guys, of having a platform to share my thoughts like this, to get it out to you guys, and for the people to chime in and kind of bullshit back with me. And this is why I love the Canadian game. This is why I love football. I couldn't imagine where my life would be without football. So super grateful for where I am, for the position I'm in because of this. And appreciate everyone for tuning in, not only on YouTube, but Instagram. I see R Mill 81 still chiming in on Instagram. Appreciate you, R Mill. Appreciate you for following as well. Please be sure to subscribe to the channel as well on YouTube for a ton of content. I appreciate the safe travels back to the island. I definitely will. I wish I could hit a button and I would be back there a little bit faster, but that's okay. That's the perks of, I guess, living on beautiful Vancouver Island. So before we get out of here, guys, of course, please be sure to like the video, comment down below if you guys are tuning in on YouTube. Comment down below how you guys are feeling after the Lions just lost 27-14 to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in Week 3 of the 2025 CFL season. Comment down below how you guys are feeling moving forward if you're the BC Lions fan, especially going into this next month of the season. It's going to be a tough stretch for the BC Lions, if we're being honest, and they need to find a way to take care of business. At least split, come away with it 2-2. I think that is a win in the bigger picture if you're looking at it for the BC Lions. So lastly, of course, you guys could follow us on social media at Canadian Football Fanatics on Instagram, at Canadian Football Fanatics, or excuse me, at _CF Fanatics on Twitter as well. Lastly, most importantly, big shout out and thank you to Matt Baker once again for all of our access, for allowing us to do stuff like this. I'm literally, arguably, maybe a handful of people left in BC Place still here. So appreciate you, Matt. Looking forward to being back here in about a month time. It's going to be a little bit of a break, a little bit of hiatus before we're back in BC Place again, which is a little bit of a bummer, but all good. I can't wait to be back in BC Place for another game. That being said, though, folks, you guys will be able to catch us on our regular scheduled programming back on Wednesday night with the weekly show with Coach Shane, Blake, and myself this upcoming Wednesday night live on the 13th Man YouTube channel. And then, of course, we'll be back later in the week, probably Thursday night, Friday morning for our BC Lions Week 4 preview for the Saskatchewan Roughriders upcoming. So should be a good one, folks. Hope you guys enjoyed tonight's BC Lions post-game report, and we'll catch you guys on the next video.